You're holding a phone right now, or you held one at some point today. Maybe you're holding it this second. Good chance it says Samsung on the back. But here's the thing nobody tells you. The tallest building on the planet is standing because a company under that same name helped build it. A prescription someone is taking right now, somewhere in this country, was manufactured by another company under that same name. And in a boardroom on the other side of the world, one family makes decisions that ripple through an entire nation. Same last name on all of it. Samsung. You know the brand. Nobody ever showed you the system running underneath it. Hit subscribe now, because after this video, that logo is never going to look the same to you again. This started small, really small. A Korean merchant named Lee Byung-chul opens a tiny trading company, 40 employees, selling noodles, sugar, wool, basic goods, nothing more. Nothing about that storefront hinted at what was coming. Over the following decades, the company grew like something that couldn't stop splitting in two. It moved into insurance, it moved into the stock market, it moved into retail. Every new sector became a new company, always under the same roof. By the late 1960s came the real leap. Electronics. First product, a black and white TV, 12 inches, 1970. Then the company's first computer, launched 2 years before the first Windows PCs even existed. Today, almost 90 years after that small storefront, the Samsung Group is made up of 67 affiliated companies. And the numbers from the part you actually see, Samsung Electronics, are hard to process. In 2025 alone, it pulled in more than 333 trillion won, close to $230 billion. That's more than the entire economic output of a state like Nevada, generated by one single company. Net profit, over 45 trillion won. R&D spending, nearly 38 trillion, a record for the company. Infrastructure investment, over 52 trillion, most of it poured into chip and display plants. 259,000 employees, just in that one branch of the group. More people than live in a city the size of Pittsburgh. And it leads. Early 2026, it shipped more than 62 million smartphones in a single quarter, reclaiming the #1 spot worldwide, ahead of Apple. That's close to enough phones to hand a brand new one to every person living in Texas and Ohio combined. In television, it's held the top spot for 20 straight years. Nearly 30% of the global market by revenue. More than half of every luxury TV sold on Earth. 20 years is long enough for a kid to be born, grow up, and become an adult, without ever knowing a world where Samsung wasn't the biggest TV maker alive. But that's just the part you can see. The same name in your pocket is also in your car, through a division called Harman. It's in construction, in the company that helped raise the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. The tallest building on the planet, standing, with the same signature on it. It didn't stop there. It also built the second tallest tower in Malaysia, and the Petronas Towers, once the tallest buildings in the world when they opened in 1998. Think about that. 3 of the most iconic skylines on Earth, in 3 different countries, all carrying the name of a company you only think of as your phone. It's in medicine too, manufacturing drugs for other pharmaceutical companies, through a biotech division that grew more than 30% in a single year. A pace most legacy drug makers would need years to match. It's in the cloud, in AI, in data centers, through a tech company that alone brings in nearly 14 trillion won a year. That one division, on its own, would rank as a heavyweight on any stock exchange in the world. Construction, medicine, artificial intelligence, phones, TVs, all wearing the same last name. And this is exactly where most people stop paying attention. They think they get it. Big company, diversified, efficient. But I promise you, that's not even half the story. What actually connects all these companies isn't the logo. It's a power structure almost nobody outside South Korea ever sees. If you've watched other videos on this channel about families quietly running entire sectors of the economy, hold on to that thought, because the next part is going to remind you of it fast. Layer 1. Samsung isn't a company, it's a chaebol. Chaebol is the word South Korea uses for this kind of conglomerate. Dozens of companies, completely different industries, held together not by shared operations, but by one family's control. The model was born after the war. The government bet on a handful of business groups to rebuild the economy fast. It worked. Korea became one of the biggest economies on the planet in just a few decades. But the price came bundled in. A huge share of economic power ended up locked inside a tiny number of families. And Samsung is the biggest chaebol in the country. Here's what that means for you in practice. When you buy a phone, the money doesn't stay in one factory. It moves through an entire web of companies under the same group, passing hand to hand, never really leaving the family. Among Korea's 10 biggest chaebols, internal deals between related companies made up close to 70% of all that type of transaction value in 2025. More than 190 trillion won, circulating inside a handful of families. That's in the range of the entire GDP of a mid-sized country. A whole nation working an entire year just to produce what quietly moves between companies that share one last name. Layer 2, and this one gets more interesting. If Samsung is a web of dozens of companies, who sits at the center of that web? It has a name, Samsung C&T. On paper, it's a construction firm, the same one that raised the Burj Khalifa. Its engineering arm alone brought in more than 14 trillion won in 2025. But it also runs fashion, tourism, trading, investment. The Financial Times described it in blunt terms once, calling it, quote, the de facto holding company of the entire group, end quote. Not on paper, in practice. Because Samsung C&T holds a stake in Samsung Life, one of Korea's biggest insurers. And Samsung Life holds a stake in Samsung Electronics, one company sitting inside another, Picture a Russian nesting doll. Except instead of painted wood, it's stock. Each company holds a slice of the next one until the circle closes on itself. And at the end of that chain sits the same family that started it all, the Lee family. Layer 3. This is where the mechanism finally shows itself. How does one family control a conglomerate this size without owning a majority of any single company inside it? Look at Samsung Electronics' ownership breakdown. Foreign investors hold 47% of common shares. Korean individual and institutional investors hold most of the rest. And the top shareholders, including the Lee family itself, hold only about 20%. 20%. Not a majority. And yet, that's enough to keep control of the entire group, generation after generation. Because control, inside a chaebol, was never about owning the majority of one company. It's about holding strategic stakes across a network that props itself up. It's not fraud. It's not illegal. It's corporate engineering, built up over decades. In 2015, two companies inside the group went through a controversial merger. South Korean prosecutors alleged it was designed to tighten the grip of Lee Jae-yong, now chairman of Samsung Electronics, over the entire conglomerate. The case went to court. In July of 2025, South Korea's Supreme Court upheld Lee's acquittal. No conviction. That doesn't prove the system is corrupt. It proves something almost more uncomfortable. You can restructure control of an entire empire, fully within the law, using the market's own rules in your favor, and walk away with a clean record. When a small handful of families hold this much power, a business decision starts carrying the weight of a policy decision. It's not a tax, it's not an accident, it's a business model built to outlast generations. Layer 4. And this one lands closer to home. Because none of this stays inside South Korea. When one conglomerate controls that much of the world's memory chips, displays, and processors, it moves the price of nearly every piece of electronics on the planet. If Samsung slows down production on a single component, the cost of phones, laptops, and TVs climbs everywhere, including right here in the United States. You end up paying more for your next device, and you'll probably never know why. That's the invisible cost of depending on a system so concentrated it can shift a global market on its own. No ad campaign, no warning, no headline. And the next chapter is already underway. In 2026, South Korea announced a national investment plan in chips and AI that could top $576 billion, with Samsung leading the charge. There are also unconfirmed reports of an internal group plan to invest 1,000 trillion won over the next decade, chasing that same race. Worth a reality check before we close this out. A family-run conglomerate isn't automatically proof of abuse, and it's not a uniquely Korean invention. Japan had the zaibatsu before World War II. Massive conglomerates controlled by a single family, running everything from banking to heavy industry. After the war, the country went through forced reforms specifically to break up that kind of concentrated power, splitting parts of those structures into independent companies. South Korea has debated similar reforms for decades. Laws to limit cross-shareholding, boost transparency, cut the chaebols down to size. Some passed, some didn't. The model was never fully taken apart. There's a path out there. It just hasn't been walked to the end. And until that happens, the model keeps running, generation after generation, exactly the way it always has. Maybe the real question here isn't how big Samsung is. Maybe it's this. How many things in your life, from the screen you're looking at right now to the tallest building you've ever seen in a photo, run through the same family, without you ever hearing their name? And how many other brands, in other countries, are hiding a similar structure behind a friendly logo? Samsung's just easier to spot because it grew too big to hide, too big to fit on one store shelf, too big to fit in one pocket. You're probably not going to stop buying Samsung because of any of this. Nobody here is asking you to. But now you know that behind the brand, there's a system. And a system, unlike a product, isn't something you choose to buy. You just live inside it. If this video changed the way you see that logo, subscribe to the channel and send it to someone who's about to be just as surprised. Drop a comment with the next company you want us to pull apart like this, layer by layer. Because there's a hidden system behind almost every brand you use without thinking twice. And we're going to keep taking them apart, one at a time. So next time you pick up your Samsung phone, remember, you see the brand, we find the system.